TeneT, and it was really good. It was your standard quality Nolan fare, so pretty good by all counts. Not one of his masterpieces, but probably the one, the next best one behind them. And that still puts it as one of the better Nolan movies, obviously. I'll start off spoiler free, but then just gonna warn you that we're gonna go into spoiler territory afterwards. So starting off with the spoiler free, there's a lot of fun ideas in here. A lot of people gave me the wrong impression. They kept saying the first half is more of a spy movie and a heist movie, and it isn't very Nolan-y. And the whole movie is like a mind puzzle, and you never quite can figure out what's going on unless you're really, really smart. And uh, even like geniuses of film will have no clue what's going on in this movie. So I'm like, okay, I just finished watching, I'm thinking about ending things. So I'm like, I'm probably gonna have no clue what's going on in this movie. It's gonna feed me no answers. And I'm just gonna have to solve it, unlock it on my own, which is like, great, I love that. But then I watched the movie, and within the opening 5 minutes, I understand the entire plot of the movie. I'm like, yep, all my predictions for the movie have been correct. This is the simplest thing, the simplest explanation for a complicated plot, and it doesn't take very much brain power to solve it. It's not exactly a puzzle, in my eyes at least. I thought it was really simple to figure out and to understand. Maybe for other people it's not as easy, but for me it was disappointingly easy to figure out. And maybe it's because I like movies that are like more difficult to figure out, that finding one that's more lenient on its audience not understanding made it easier. I don't know. But that was just something I noticed right off the bat, because they literally give like a 5 minute explanation in the film's second scene. Um, and the other thing that you notice right away when looking back on the movie is that there's a lot more action going on, like action genre thrills going on. Just so many sequences than the average Nolan film. In fact, this might be the most sequences. Now, granted, all these sequences are short, but there's still so many of them that it's quite impressive to see. And the movie's quite lengthy, so seeing it do this over such a long period of time is still impressive. Uh, so since the action is probably the most impressive part of the movie, that and its philosophical ideas, even though simple and not anything new and really predictable, uh, they're still interesting philosophical angles on the idea of time and sort of things we've seen before and can grasp and understand, especially if you've seen a lot of other things like this, which I have, which also helps me grasp the narrative. I guess if you hadn't seen any other things like TeneT, then maybe you can't grasp it as well. But me, I've played a lot of games, I've watched a lot of TV shows, I've watched a lot of movies, and a lot of them use a lot of narrative tricks that this one does. And you have to understand all that if you want to understand this movie. And I do, and it was really easy for me to just get. Yeah, no, I didn't really have any problems in that regard. Um, it is a very fun movie. It just doesn't quite have the wow factor that Inception had. This, I heard one of my friends, I saw it with 3 friends. One of them described it as Inception Light, which I think is a very apt description. It constantly feels like you're watching an Inception knockoff or like an Inception sequel, where it's like almost as good as the original, but just not quite there, and just something's off about it, where it's like almost amazing, but there's just something that's a tad off on it. Um, the the acting isn't anything to write home about. It's charismatic for sure. All the actors are super likable on screen, even though the objectively looking back on it and looking at it for the first time, uh, I thought the acting was kind of mediocre to bad in some places. Uh, the main part where I took issue with the acting was the villain, who, in case, I think they kept it a secret who played the villain, so I won't state who the villain is played by, but, bless him, he tried so hard to pull off being menacing and scary and, being just a disturbing presence. But the thing is, he's not scary. He's not menacing. He just comes off as someone who's like giving 110% to come off as threatening, and he just isn't. He's trying way too hard to be scary, and he's just not. I don't know. Maybe it's just how I feel about the actor's presence and like how I've seen him in previous roles that can always do it. Like I know how I feel about Kristen Wiig as a villain in Wonder Woman 1984. I'm already like negative about it. It's like I don't think I that she can pull that off because she's been in too many comedic roles and I just don't buy her as a villain. And it kind of seems like a ripoff of Iron Man 3, the way that they're going about it, too. And it just seems more funny than it is threatening. And that's sort of the same case here, where it seems more funny than threatening, and just kind of adorable of an effort where it's like, see, guys, see, I'm going to throw a little tantrum, and you guys are going to be scared by it. But it's just too much of a try hard to really be scared by it. It just more comes off as funny. When the movie tries to make this terrifying, it becomes increasingly harder to ignore and increasingly funny because the movie is like, look how scary all this is. And you're just like, this isn't scary though. This is funny actually. Because he's like screaming about like, I don't know what the heck he's going on about. Like, I think the exact quote is like, crazy deranged effing tigers, I think was how they decided to use their one PG-13 F-bomb. And he's just going on this tangent, and he's just trying so hard, and he's just like not latching onto anything. And I don't know if this is from a writing standpoint or an acting or both. I think it's both. But he's just, it's not much to work on. And the PG-13 limit definitely doesn't help with this, because it doesn't show him doing anything too shocking. In fact, the one scene where they want you to be traumatized by the disturbing event that happens, they don't even show it to you. They cover it up and then play this aren't you horrified sound effect for the longest time, like you saw the impact of what happened, but you didn't because it's a PG-13 movie and they can't show that in a PG-13 movie. And if they did, it would have been so much more effective and threatening. But since you didn't, you still have this soft, cuddly bear image of this bad guy who's trying super hard to come off as a bad guy, and he just doesn't. So it doesn't shatter that. And it could have, but it doesn't. And it's really frustrating how much of a missed opportunity that is. It doesn't, like, take away from the movie to me that the villain was casted the way that he was, and that he was like such a disappointment. Mostly because it's still played off charismatically. I still really like the actor, so I didn't like hate the performance. I saw what he was going for. He definitely put in the effort. A lot of the people that I saw it with said, yeah, I thought he was pretty good in it. But it was just me that was like, I wasn't quite convinced by the terror of it. And, you know, it's a sci-fi action movie, so it's not going to be very scary anyways. But yeah, I think the logic mostly checked out, but on a rewatch, I could see that not working for, like, time, how it works. They never really explained much of how TeneT works. Uh, I should go into non-spoilery things. One issue that I think everyone was suffering from, I know everyone in my group was, is that the bass is way too loud. And all the sound effects and the music are also way too loud. And all the dialogue is uh very, very quiet. Way too quiet. You can't hear a single word they're saying throughout the entire movie. Because they're always muffled from mumbling and wearing masks and just being in these environments where you just can't understand what they're saying. And it makes it more difficult to follow on what's going on, even though I figured all of what was going on when you can't hear what they're saying, because it's very irritating when instead of, here, let me give you an example. It's like if you're listening to dubstep and someone was trying to talk over it, and the bass drop was 2.5 hours, and the person talking over it was whispering, and you're trying to listen to that whisper for 2.5 hours. But the aesthetics of the bass drop trying to mimic. So try to understand what I'm saying when this song is playing. Because honestly, I cannot understand a word that they're saying in this movie. And it's really difficult for me. Because this is exactly what it's like. Because you just can't understand a single word that they're saying. And it's really difficult. And it's irritating. Because you want to follow what's going on. Because it's important. But you're struggling. And it hurts. And it kind of wrecks the movie a bit. And you just wish that they would put some subtitles on. There were a lot of moments in the movie where I felt like it should have played out differently than it did. But I'll go into the spoiler section for that when I'm ready. 9.25 out of 10, and that's due to change. It might go down. Might go up. I don't know. The cinematography was very nice in the movie. I really liked the visual effects as well. There were some scenes where characters were walking that felt like they were green screen, though. And even though the action is definitely where the movie's at, for sure, there were like some standout sequences that I really liked. I won't name drop them because, I don't want to give spoilers. But when you drop down from that elevated sequence to like them giving out plot, it just really slows the momentum, and suddenly you realize how little you care about the characters and how little you care about the actual plot. I know it sounds childish and it sounds like shallow, but you kind of just want to get back to the action again because, like, once you understand how the plot works and where it's going and just the predictable nature of it all, there isn't really any need to focus any more time on it. So to do so kind of feels boring because the plot is so very predictable, and the only part of it that's worth focusing on is the philosophical nature of how time works and how you cannot change it, and how each scene where you revisit the past has to be kept exactly the same. And with that, I think we have to transition over to the spoiler section. So if you've not seen TeneT, you should probably reverse time and go see the movie by stopping the video and come back when you've seen it. So, I'm going to go into spoilers now. If you've not seen the movie, be warned, these are spoilers now. Okay. So, first off, let's go. Since I couldn't hear much, I was kind of confused that the opera section at the opening of the movie didn't come back again at the end, because that felt like it would have been the perfect ending point for the movie. I thought for sure that one of the lead characters would get killed at the opera scene and end up as like a dead body pretending to lay dead back at that opening scene because it felt like a perfect fit when I was watching it. Uh, I was guessing it would be either Robert Pattinson or John David Washington, but alas, it turns out Robert Pattinson was the one to take it at the end, though in a different spot. And I knew one of the characters was going to bite it, but if there was one thing I knew in the movie, Elizabeth Debicki was not going to be the one to bite it. So when they teased killing off Elizabeth Debicki, it was the most painfully condescending thing because we all knew that she wasn't gonna die. If anyone was gonna die in that scene where there was the bloody bullet hole in the wall, it was gonna be the villain, which I can say who he's played by now, Kenneth Branagh, who is gonna be directing Death on the Nile, and who recently directed the flop Artemis Fowl. So I was expecting her to somehow get the very inept villain's gun away from him and to just shoot him in the head over there. But then the other way that could have gone, I was also thinking about, was the way that ended up going, and she ended up getting shot somewhere non-vital. But I would have appreciated the balls of killing her off in that scene. And then if they wanted to reverse time and save her, they could. Or if they wanted to live with the impact of her dying, that could work too. And it could work as like how you can't change the past, even when something really bad like that happens. Or again, they could do like another thing where she gets shot, we think she's dead, and then later we find out she's alive or something like that. There's just so many different ways that they could have gone with the scene that I felt like would have been less predictable, and more interesting, more down to the point, if I'm being honest, that they didn't do. Because there were like all these little points that they wanted to do where it's like, oh, we had to have Elizabeth Debicki for the third act of the movie. And then when you see her just like kind of just laying down and rolling around throughout the whole third act of the movie, it's like, so why exactly did we need her again? Because she's kind of just like out of commission the rest of the movie anyways. So you may as well have killed her off. The only thing she does in the third act is the hilariously pathetic killing of the villain, where she gives up on her plan of killing the villain and rubbing suntan lotion on him, only for him to slip and slide off of his ship after getting shot, and to brutally break his neck on the way down to the ocean. And it's hilarious, again, because he is such a pathetic villain, and just such a weak villain. Oh my gosh. I still feel like they needed to work on their villain way better, especially for someone that they hid from the advertising. That's why they hid him from the advertising, isn't it? Because his acting was so hammy and so unintentionally funny in like such a blackly comic way that every single thing that he did was so try-hard that was funny instead of intimidating. Including when the moment I was talking about earlier was when he beat up his wife and they didn't show it. And then you heard that little sting in the music, but they didn't show it. They should only use that sting if they show it. And like, I feel like you could have gotten away with that in a PG-13 now that I'm thinking about it more. So like, they should have had the balls to show it, but then they're like, oh no, what if abuse victims watch this and get traumatized? And it's like, come on, man. You can't have your cake and eat it too. If you're gonna use the sting, you have to show something. Or, if you want to hide it from view, her abuse, then just don't use the sting. Don't go for, like, such an easy point on the plot where it's like, oh, this is how we make our character likable. This is how we make our villain unlikable. It's like, it's a cheap shot. It's very, very cheap. And I don't like it. But the movie's still, like, good. Literally everyone predicted that at one point the movie would go backwards. I'm glad that they didn't commit to that, because watching the sequences again backwards would have been tiring after terribly long. Um, yeah, I was hoping that they would have saved like a real big wow moment at the end, but they didn't really. It kind of lacks that punch that Inception had. Uh, the one thing plot wise that confused me, which is rare, is why did Robert Pattinson want to kill himself? Why John David Washington tried to shoot himself 3 times, but they also explained, oh, his gun probably slipped, which again I didn't see. So, yeah, it's flawed, but it's still good. It's more likable, I'd say, than some of Christopher Nolan's other entries. It's definitely worth a go and worth supporting. It's a lot of fun, which is most important. All these flaws that I've mentioned, honestly, in the long run, don't really bother me that much. The main thing that concerns me is, did I enjoy watching the movie? And how much do these issues bug me in the long run? Or does the fun overwhelm the issues? And in this case, the fun overwhelmed the issues. Yeah. Why'd they need masks to, breathe and when going backwards? Like, why is the air not breathable? That is kind of weird. And then, yeah, they didn't. Again, I'm taking from points that were said by my friends, but it's also weird that they didn't explain the technology of time travel and the past and the future. Like, why does turning make time turn? That's kind of weird. The everyone is you thing was very predictable. So is most of the plot elements. That's been done to death before, and that you were from the future. A lot of it felt like derivative of Terminator, which is odd. A lot of the movie felt derivative, actually. Gosh, was there something else? I always feel like there's something else. I guess that could be the end of the review. I've gone on long enough. Anyways, thank you for watching, and do